The TSA agent's hand froze halfway into the bag the moment he saw it, and the color drained from his face so fast that the supervisor behind him actually stepped forward, concerned he might collapse. But it wasn't fear on his face. It was the sudden, crushing realization that he had just made a mistake that would follow him for the rest of his career. Because the quiet blonde woman he'd been humiliating for the last 5 minutes, the one whose bag he'd just dumped onto the table in front of everyone, wasn't some random traveler trying to sneak contraband through security. And that small velvet case he was now holding, the one that had triggered every alarm in his training, contained something that made his supervisor go completely still and whisper a single word that changed everything. Authentic. 30 minutes earlier, Terminal C at Dulles International Airport moved with its usual controlled chaos, announcements echoing off polished floors, travelers shuffling through security lines, the rhythmic beep of scanners marking time like a mechanical heartbeat. The blonde woman in her late 20s stood in line 3, dressed simply in dark jeans, a charcoal blazer, and boots worn soft at the heels. Her carry-on sat at her feet, unremarkable black canvas, no tags, no markings. She held her boarding pass loosely, her posture relaxed but not casual, balanced, aware, the kind of stillness that comes from discipline rather than boredom. Most people didn't notice her. She didn't draw attention. She didn't need to. TSA Agent Derek Morrison noticed everyone. It was his job, his duty, and after 6 years on the line, he prided himself on reading people before they even reached the conveyor belt. He watched the blonde woman approach, taking in the details, too calm, no nervous fidgeting, no phone scrolling, no visible reaction to the wait. That alone raised a flag in his mind. Normal travelers showed something. Impatience, fatigue, irritation. She showed nothing. When she reached the front, she placed her bag on the belt without being asked, removed her jacket with efficient movements, and stepped toward the scanner with the kind of familiarity that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times. But Morrison had already decided something was off. The bag went through. The scanner beeped. Yellow alert. Organic material flagged. Standard, but enough. Step aside, please, Morrison said, his tone flat, procedural. She complied immediately, moving to the secondary table without question, without protest, her expression unchanged. And somehow, that calm compliance irritated him more than resistance would have, because it felt like indifference, like she didn't think the rules applied to her. He pulled the bag off the belt and set it down harder than necessary. This your bag? Yes, she said quietly. You pack it yourself? Yes. Anyone give you anything to carry? No. Morrison unzipped it slowly, his movements deliberate, drawing the attention of nearby travelers. A small crowd was forming now, people glancing over as they retied shoes, curious about the delay, about the woman standing too still under scrutiny. He pulled items out one by one. Clothes, neatly folded. Toiletries in regulation bags. A paperback novel, dog-eared. A phone charger. Normal. Too normal. Then his fingers brushed something small and hard, wrapped in a soft cloth at the bottom corner of the bag. He pulled it out. A velvet case, navy blue, sealed with a small brass clasp. Morrison's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the thing that didn't belong. What's this? He asked, holding it up. The woman's eyes flicked to the case, then back to him. Personal item. I need you to open it. I'd prefer not to. And there it was. Resistance. Exactly what he'd been waiting for. Morrison straightened, his voice hardening. Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call a supervisor and escalate this to law enforcement. She didn't argue. She just looked at him with that same steady gaze, and something in her expression shifted. Not fear, not defiance, just a quiet resignation, like she knew exactly how this was going to unfold and had already accepted it. Open the case, Morrison repeated, louder now, ensuring the people around them could hear. Establishing authority. Slowly, she reached forward and unclasped it. Morrison pulled the lid back. Inside, nested in dark satin, sat a medal. Not a souvenir. Not a replica. The real thing. Heavy, intricate, unmistakable in its craftsmanship. A gold star suspended from a light blue ribbon. The design so specific that Morrison's brain immediately tried to place it, to match it against the catalog of images from training, from news reports, from... His hand froze. Behind him, Supervisor Linda Ortiz had been watching from her station. She stepped forward now, her expression shifting from routine oversight to sharp focus the moment she saw Morrison's face. She moved quickly, positioning herself beside him, and looked down into the case. Her breath caught. For 3 full seconds, no one spoke. The noise of the terminal seemed to fade into the background as the weight of what they were looking at settled in. Ortiz's voice came out low, controlled, but edged with something Morrison had never heard from her before. Disbelief. Maybe even fear. That's authentic. Morrison's hands started to shake. Supervisor Ortiz didn't move for another beat. Her eyes locked on the metal resting in the velvet case like it might detonate if disturbed. Around them, the security line had slowed to a crawl, travelers craning their necks, sensing that something significant was unfolding even if they couldn't name it. Morrison's mouth opened, then closed. He looked from the metal to the woman, then back to Ortiz, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Ma'am," Ortiz said quietly, her tone stripped of the procedural sharpness she usually carried. "May I ask your name?" The blonde woman didn't hesitate. Captain Ava Lindstrom. The title landed like a physical blow. Morrison took an involuntary step back, his face flushing as the pieces began clicking into place. The posture, the calm, the complete absence of fear. This wasn't defiance. This was discipline. And he had just publicly challenged someone who outranked half the officers on the base he'd worked near before joining TSA. Ortiz straightened, her training overriding her shock. "Captain, I apologize for the inconvenience. We'll need to verify." "I understand," Ava said, her voice still even, still controlled. "Do what you need to do." Ortiz nodded once, then turned to Morrison, her expression hardening. "Step back." Now, it wasn't a suggestion. Morrison moved, his hands still trembling slightly as Ortiz carefully closed the case and set it aside. She pulled out her radio, stepping a few feet away, her voice dropping into urgent, clipped communication with someone higher up the chain. Morrison stood frozen, his mind racing. He replayed every word he'd said, every gesture, every moment of assumed authority, and each one now felt like evidence being compiled against him. Around him, other TSA agents had noticed the shift in energy. A few exchanged glances. One whispered something to a colleague. Word was spreading. Ortiz returned, her expression unreadable. "Captain Lindstrom, we're going to need you to come with us to a private screening area while we verify your credentials." "Of course," Ava said. "And I'm going to have to ask you to leave your belongings here temporarily." Ava nodded once, then turned and walked toward the indicated door, her movements calm, unhurried, as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a public interrogation. Ortiz followed, leaving Morrison standing beside the table, the open bag, and the small velvet case that had just appended everything. 20 minutes later, in a small office behind the security checkpoint, Ortiz sat across from Ava while 2 airport police officers stood near the door. On the desk between them sat a laptop, its screen displaying military service records that Ortiz had pulled through secure channels after 3 separate verification calls. The records were extensive. Deployment dates, unit assignments, commendations, and then, near the bottom, a citation summary that made Ortiz exhale slowly, the kind of breath that comes when you realize you're looking at something far beyond your clearance level, something that most people would never see, never understand, never come close to earning. "Captain," Ortiz said carefully, "your record is impressive." Ava said nothing. She didn't need to. One of the officers spoke up, his voice respectful now. "Ma'am, can you tell us why you were traveling with the medal in your carry-on?" Ava's gaze shifted to him. "I'm en route to a ceremony at Arlington. The medal was recently reissued after the original was damaged in a training accident. I was instructed to transport it personally." Ortiz glanced at the screen again, cross-referencing. Everything matched. Every detail aligned. And the medal itself. She'd seen photos during training, seen replicas in museums, but never the real thing, never up close. It was awarded for actions under fire, for decisions made when survival wasn't guaranteed and failure wasn't an option. It wasn't given lightly. It wasn't given often. "Captain Lindstrom," Ortiz said slowly, "I owe you an apology. Agent Morrison acted on procedure, but the situation was mishandled. He did his job," Ava said simply. "He humiliated you in public." Ava's expression didn't change. He made an assumption. It happens. Ortiz leaned back slightly, studying her. Most people wouldn't be this calm. Most people aren't trained to be. The room fell quiet again. Then Ortiz stood, gesturing to one of the officers. Escort Captain Lindstrom back to the checkpoint. Make sure her belongings are returned exactly as they were. And make sure she gets priority boarding. Yes, ma'am. As they walked back through the secured corridors, Ava's boots echoed softly against the tile. When they reached the checkpoint, Morrison was still there, standing stiffly near the supervisor station, his face pale. The moment he saw her, he straightened, his hands clenching at his sides. Ortiz stepped forward first, positioning herself between them. Agent Morrison, you're relieved for the rest of your shift. Report to my office in 30 minutes. Morrison nodded once, his throat tight, but before he could turn away, Ava spoke. Agent Morrison. He stopped, forcing himself to meet her eyes. You saw something that didn't fit your expectations, she said quietly. And you acted. That's not wrong. But next time, ask before you assume. Morrison swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Ava gave a small nod, then turned as another agent handed her the velvet case, now resealed, along with her bag, fully repacked. And as she walked toward her gate, the terminal seemed to part around her, not out of fear, but out of respect that had finally, belatedly, been recognized. The departure gate was quieter than the main terminal, insulated from the noise by distance and the late afternoon lull between waves of flights. Ava found a seat near the window, away from the clusters of travelers, and set her bag down beside her. She didn't open the velvet case again. She didn't need to. The weight of it was familiar enough, both the physical heft and the burden it represented, not of pride, but of memory, of the people who hadn't made it home, of the decisions that couldn't be undone. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of stillness now that the scrutiny had passed. Around her, life continued as it always did. A businessman typed frantically on his laptop. A young mother juggled a toddler in a phone call. An elderly couple sat hand in hand, waiting patiently. None of them knew. None of them needed to. Footsteps approached, hesitant, uneven. Ava glanced up. Agent Morrison stood a few feet away, out of uniform now, wearing a plain jacket and jeans, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His face was drawn, older somehow than it had been an hour ago, the confidence that had armored him completely stripped away. Captain Lindstrom, he said, his voice quiet, uncertain. I know I don't have the right to ask, but can I sit? Ava studied him for a moment, then gestured to the empty seat across from her. Morrison sat slowly, his posture tight, his eyes fixed on the floor. I wanted to apologize again, he said. Not because I was told to, because I need you to know I understand what I did. Ava waited, letting him continue. I saw you and I made a judgment, Morrison said. I decided you didn't belong before I knew anything about you. And when you didn't react the way I expected, I pushed harder. I wanted to be right more than I wanted to be fair. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. I don't know what you did to earn that medal. I don't have the clearance to know. But I know it's not something they give out for showing up. And I treated you like you were trying to fake your way through my checkpoint. Ava's expression softened slightly, not with pity, but with understanding. You're not the first person to make that mistake, she said. And you won't be the last. That doesn't make it right. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But what you do with it now matters more than what you did then. Morrison nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Ortiz suspended me for a week. Mandatory retraining. I'll probably lose my position on the senior line. Good, Ava said simply. Morrison blinked, surprised. You needed to be stopped, she continued. Not because you're a bad agent, but because you stopped seeing people and started seeing problems. That's dangerous. In your job. In any job. Morrison swallowed hard, the truth of it settling in. How do you do it? He asked quietly. Stay calm like that. Even when someone's treating you like you don't matter. Ava was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the window, toward the planes lined up on the tarmac. Because I know who I am, she said finally. And I know what I've done. Your opinion doesn't change that. No one's does. She turned back to him. But that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It just means I don't carry it the same way you think I should. Morrison nodded, the weight of the lesson landing fully now. Thank you, he said, for not making this worse than it had to be. You made it what it was, Ava said. I just didn't add to it. A voice crackled over the intercom, calling for priority boarding. Ava stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder, the velvet case secured safely inside. Morrison stood as well, stepping aside to let her pass. "Captain," he said as she moved toward the gate. She paused, glancing back. "I won't forget this." "Good," she said. "Don't." And then she walked toward the jetway, her stride steady, her presence quiet but undeniable, disappearing into the flow of travelers as if she had never been singled out at all. Morrison stood there for a long moment, watching the space where she had been, before turning and walking back through the terminal. He didn't know where her flight was taking her. He didn't know what ceremony waited at the other end. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never look at someone the same way again. Because the most dangerous assumption isn't the one you make about an enemy. It's the one you make about the person standing right in front of you, calm and quiet, carrying weight you'll never see and strength you'll never fully understand until it's too late to take back the moment you underestimated them. And as Ava's plane lifted into the sky, the medal rested in her bag, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of sacrifice, of service, and of the truth that real authority never needs to announce itself. It simply exists, steady and unshaken, long after the noise fades away.